This episode of Android Authority is brought to you by lynda.com. Try lynda.com free for 7 days by visiting lynda.com/android. This week we found out more about the impending release of the Samsung Galaxy Note 3, and also the Moto X. A new Nexus 10 was somewhat teased, and unfortunately and sadly, one of the heroes of open development has decided to leave. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And it's time for another dose of the week's top Android news. It's Android Authority Weekly. As was expected last week, the Android Device Manager was recently released, giving users a Google official way of locating, ringing, and erasing a lost or stolen device. The great news for ADM is that the rollout seems to be happening across the globe, so it's not just restricted to the US. Check your security settings and you should see Android Device Manager in the device administrators either now or soon. The web interface is also live, and you can find it at google.com/android/device manager. If you do have and have started using the new ADM, let us know what you think of it in the comments below. The long-awaited update to the Galaxy Note line looks to be a part of the next Samsung Unpacked event. Samsung began to send out invites to Unpacked Part 2, which will be held in Berlin ahead of the IFA conference. It will be streamed online for everyone who isn't able to attend. And of course, we'll have all of the coverage of the announcement here on Android Authority. Speaking of releases, we got a pretty big one this week. The LG G2 was officially unveiled, and it is quite the incredible device. Make sure you check out Chris's coverage of the event, which he attended, with his hands-on and also his first impressions. But here's the gist. A powerful Snapdragon 800 processor powers the G2, backed by the updated Adreno 330. The screen is actually 5.2 inches, and this was made possible by moving the button layout to the back, thus opening up the bezel space. Yes, the volume rockers and power button are now found on the top back portion of the device, making those buttons accessible via your index finger. Even if it does look radically different, Chris and plenty of other people out there have stated that it's actually not all that bad. Also included is a new feature called Graphic RAM, which reduces the display's power consumption when on a static image. It will be available soon on major carriers including AT&T and Verizon. Stay tuned for our full review when we get our own copy of the G2. Also, kind of a little funny thing that I figured out earlier today, even though the new flagship by LG doesn't bear the Optimus name, we can still look back to the first iteration of this phone and call it the OG. Get it? LG Optimus G, LG OG, because it is. And from there we move on to some key lime pie. Apparently there is a certain build of this new version of the Android operating system that already works on some current devices. Well, this past week we did start finding K builds of Android popping up, and they were being run, or at least tested, on Nexus 4 phones and Nexus 7 tablets. This could very likely mean that Google is in the process of testing the next iteration of Android. It's an interesting prospect, and if it's true, Android could be getting a major refresh sooner than later. So there's no doubt that the Moto X clogged up the airwaves for the better part of, say, the last 2 months, but finally last week it got officially unveiled. People are still somewhat reeling from the unveiling of Moto's new flagship, but at least this past week, we finally got some real release info. Reports from at&t claim that the definite release date is going to be August 23rd, and it's going to happen on all 4 major US carriers. That would be AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon. While this has yet to be completely confirmed, it is nice to see a simultaneous release across all major networks. Unfortunately, however, the Moto Maker app made for customizing your future Moto X will remain an AT&T exclusive for at least a little while. If you are on any of the other 3 carriers, you may just have to settle for a predetermined build. Now, you may not have been one of the many people out there who lamented the mid-range, somewhat specs of the Moto X, but you must have certainly heard all of the babble. Either you thought that the 720p display or the S4 Pro was a big miss for Moto, or you understood that maybe it had to do more with the user experience rather than what had to be on paper. Well, Motorola SVP of Product Development Iqbal Arshad wanted to throw some gas on the flame. Not just by addressing the naysayers, but by directly comparing the Moto X to top current devices. For one thing, he defends the processing package as one that focuses on utility rather than just an arbitrarily raw number of cores. But then he goes on to state that the new features on the Samsung Galaxy S4 didn't really make it smart at all. Quote, I mean, what do you do with the Galaxy S4 that you can't do with the Galaxy S3? The answer is nothing. While most of you won't know for sure if the Moto X is better than other phones in the market today until you actually get to physically compare them, there's one thing we definitely know for sure. The competition is heating up. While you shield yourself from the crossfire, distract yourself with this juicy bit of rumor from Taylor Wimberly. Apparently, Motorola will be developing a Nexus device that is set for release by the end of the year. And no, it's not a Google Play edition of the Moto X. Though very vague, speculation now points to Motorola as the next developer of a Nexus phone. A Motorola Nexus? Interesting. And now we move on to some sad news. One of the champions of AOSP, perhaps one of its most important, has decided to step down. Jean-Baptiste Guéroux, technical lead for the AOSP at Google, has left, and while he probably isn't gone from Google completely, his departure seems to involve more than meets the eye. JBQ has stated that his leaving has to do with the decreasing openness of the open software he so passionately supports. And unfortunately, one of the main culprits behind this recent trend is Qualcomm. Though a generally quiet entity, Qualcomm has kept their property pretty close to the chest, making it tough on the AOSP community to make headway on Nexus devices. Since then, a petition to Qualcomm to release all drivers, binaries, and the like to AOSP has been created. The people want Qualcomm to play ball, and have come together to try to make that happen. JBQ disagrees with this tactic, however, because primarily it does add burden to those people in the system who are already trying to find a solution. If you wish to see or sign the petition, we will provide a link in the description below. However, also, voice your opinion about this ongoing saga in the comments below. We end on a hopeful note, a hope for the next Nexus 10. When the second generation Nexus 7 was finally unveiled, a journalist at the Wall Street Journal spoke to Sundar Pichai about the Nexus 10 and was supposedly told that Samsung would develop it in time for the holidays. Well, that was about hopefully half right. Turns out Sundar never actually said it was going to be Samsung, and several sources have dug deep to find that the next 10-inch tablet by Google will actually probably be developed by ASUS. Since the original Nexus 10 was released around mid-November of last year, no matter if it's ASUS or Samsung or somebody else, it should be nearing the final stages of development. Well, we'll let you know what we find out when we get more information on the new Nexus 10, but rest assured, in the coming weeks we should be seeing a lot more rumors, speculations, and more leaks. And as always, you can find a written companion for this video in the description below. Drop us a like and don't forget to subscribe to the Android Authority channel. We have a lot of other content on this channel, including our other weekly shows like the Sunday giveaway and, of course, Q&A, both shows which are hosted by Chris. Don't forget to come back here next week at the same time, same place for your next dose of the week's top Android news. Android Authority, because we're your source for all things Android.